Maybe. Yeah, it looks like my mic is doing fine. All right, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about free will and decision making and trying not to catastrophize any time we have to make a decision. Because ultimately, any decision we make could have a major effect on us, whether it be words or actions we say to a friend or an acquaintance or something that we do on our own. Eventually, it could turn into a tiny roadblock, a massive door to a new path, so on and so forth. The concept that as an individual, we only affect ourselves is a very prevalent theme within the West, and yet it is the most asinine and incorrect statement about reality. And so we're going to talk about that a bit today. Choose Your Adventure dating game. Um, yeah, so I came to a kind of point at the end of this game after I already went through it one time, got a certain path that I wanted. But now I'm at the point where if I try and choose anything, I only get bad endings. And that's because I got too sidetracked with the main road I was on and chose all these other side roads that led me astray. And like none of them actually like have romantic feelings for me really. It's all just like friendships. And that's fine, whatever, but like it's because the player, me, chose this inadvertently. All my actions caused this, even if it wasn't what I saw happening. So to make this point a little bit more clear, ultimately, with the example that I just used of that game, is there's an outcome that is bound or potential to happen from an action you take. And yet, there could be an action you take completely seemingly at least, completely seemingly unrelated or undisturbed by whatever action you took. And yet, further on down the line, it could compound into not necessarily a catastrophe, but a blockage of outcomes where you don't have the ability to have an outcome that you desire, or where there's only like outcomes that are negative to you. Obviously, people can understand this, like when it comes to breaking the law, people are like, oh, yeah, of course I'm going to get punished. Or rational people will be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to get punished because I broke this law. Um, that's the consequence of your action, of course. Everyone understands consequences and actions. It's a basic concept. But the disconnect, I think, with a lot of people is the potential for outcomes based on something they do. I could, for say, go outside, and do sword training. And normally, whatever, it's not going to affect anyone except for me. I'm literally just in my yard training with the sword. However, there's always a potential to happen that someone could see me and think I'm a danger. Even if I'm in my own yard, whatever. And they could intervene, strike up a conversation, maybe try and ascertain why I'm doing what I'm doing. Or they could just go the full blown extreme route and be like, hey, there's a guy, 911, please, he has a sword. It's like literally just some guy swinging a sword in his backyard. Help, help, he's threatening me. Like, what? But yeah, again, it's extreme, kind of blown out of proportion, not a real thing, maybe. Um, that you would think would happen, but that stuff still happens, especially when it comes to relationships. You can have, let's say, there's this guy and he's with this girl, and um, you know, being a guy myself, it's hard to understand signals sometimes for how you should act in a social setting with another person, especially of the opposite gender. And maybe he misconstrues something and he does something, and let's say the lady received it well and she's like reciprocating, but then because of the way that he responded, um, it leads her down a different path. And of course, this has to do with a lot of extra factors. When you add in multiple different people, they can always have different outcomes off of the initial outcomes that just like compound and compound and compound. It's like my point here isn't the fact that um, you by yourself, like doing things on your own, is going to lead to this. But when you throw other people into the mix, your decisions that you make and the outcomes that you get are going to be varied and partially, or sometimes not, affected by how other people perceive and act. This is why, like, being in a community and having an actual social understanding of the people around you is important because then that's going to affect your reputation, how people perceive your actions, your words. But yeah, so decisions matter. Everything you do affects someone, and don't think that you're completely absolved of a situation or outcome just because you can't understand how your action could get to that. It may be impossible to extrapolate it with, the normal rational mind, but we live in a world where the normal rational mind does not explain or give us the actual answer for many things. And so it's rather ignorant to assume that based on what you can sense and perceive, that's the only intelligible um, path that's available. So recently I've been reading this book that I find amazing. It's called um, Christ the Eternal Tao. And so the book, to give you a little bit of understanding, so you're not just like, what? He's reading a syncretic book? Heresy. Well, yeah, that would be heresy if it was actually that, but it's not. Um, so back before he became an Orthodox monk, Father Seraphim Rose got interested within the Eastern spiritual stuff. You know, he was during that time in America where the Eastern affects started to come over to the U.S. Stuff like, I guess, Shintoism, although that's really just Buddhism. So Buddhism, um, the Indian stuff, whatever it's called, Jainism, like some other things. I guess a few other Chinese ones, like Taoism, like Confucianism. But anyway, he studied ancient, like Chinese philosophy and stuff during that time when he was taking an interest in it. Ultimately, he, ended up becoming an Orthodox Christian. A great, you know, benefit for America during its time of troubles with religious, um, I guess, landscape. But anyway, he, in looking into ancient Chinese philosophies and whatnot, discovered a person, Lao Zhu. He was a philosopher approximately like 600 years before Christ was born. And in much of his writings, like one of his compilations, the Tao Te Ching, he talks very, very similarly to Greek philosophers of the same era, despite having zero contact whatsoever. And as some people probably know, the Greek philosophers before Christ had some inkling of um, like God and, you know, the Christian God specifically. Um, so it's interesting that, someone whose culture and existence is completely separated from even the Hebrew world, because obviously the Greeks had contact, so they had some understanding, some like syncretism with Hebrews as the Hebrews did with the Greeks. Um, but in China, like they didn't have any context at all, and yet someone was able to philosophize and like find wisdom and understanding, even if it wasn't a full accurate picture, because only through the incarnation could the full understanding of what Lao Tzu described as the way or Tao. which the Greeks call logos. Only through Christ's incarnation could that be fully and totally comprehended. So yeah, anyway, this book, has a lot of interesting stuff. So I'm gonna read one portion of it for you. Uh, First, I'll show you a piece of art today. It's a lot. I think it's obviously a Chinese version of the scene, but it's Christ in the garden with, his disciples. Um, So let's see. This isn't totally related to the topic I'm talking about, but it is something I'm gonna work in. In desiring to escape pain, we seek refuge in sensual pleasure, calling it by the name of happiness. But in trying to blunt pain with pleasure, we but increase our pain. For pleasure and pain are intertwined. Therefore did the ancient sage cry, O misery, happiness lies by its side. O happiness, misery lurks beneath it. Wherever there is pleasure, there must be pain. There must be pain, for through pain we have not chosen. The way turns from illusory pleasure we have chosen. Pain forces us to rise above the realm of our senses, to live according to our true nature, our original designation. There are two kinds of pain: pain of the senses, an absence of the object of the body's desire, and pain of the soul, an absence of the object of the soul's desire. Pleasure of the senses is emptiness, ever filling itself, yet remaining ever empty. Pleasure of the soul is fullness, ever emptying itself, yet remaining ever full. Therefore, says the ancient sage, what is most full seems to be empty, but in its use cannot be exhausted. And then another piece. Um, Control of the passions by will is called strength. Yeah. So the ancient sage refers to Lao Tzu in that case. But when he calls out the way, anytime that is read, that is understood as the logos, being Christ, um, the word, which the word is Christ. If you understand the Trinity and how that works. Um, but yeah, so uh, right there, what I read was saying that we choose pain if we deny pleasure. But because we choose pleasure, we experience pain also. Not pain of the soul, but pain of the body. Whereas if we deny pleasure, we choose pain of the soul and not of the body. This goes back to, Christ's words himself. Whoever so wishes to follow me should take up his cross daily and deny himself. Taking up your cross is a form of, you know, choosing pain. It's a very hard thing to do. It's not going to look pretty. It's going to be like really, really difficult. You're going to fall down constantly and struggle all the time. And yet, that's going to be beneficial for you. This pain of the soul is going to temper you like steel in a hot furnace, crafting you into the forger's design that was intended. But pain of merely the body is going to do nothing except for diminish your body. Pleasure, especially indulgence in pleasure, is just going to cause ruin and pain, like of emotions, of your body, and then like relationships also fail, and many such cases of bad outcomes happen because of choosing pleasure. So to think about it, we'll look at it like this. Actually, in the book, it talks about it like this. You have a path that you're on, right? And that is the path of heaven. That's what Lao Tzu says. He said the path of heaven. Heaven in Chinese, ancient Chinese culture, um, refers to essentially God, like within the script that it is written. That is essentially what it means. Later on, Confucius broke it down to be heaven and earth, even though it used like either the same script or similar script, but a different understanding completely changes the meaning and the spirit of the people changes, so on and so forth. But anyway, um, so you're on the path of heaven, but then in reality, if you're not acting in accordance with the path of heaven, within you know the way that the logos, Christ designed for you, following Him, you're going to be sidetracked, especially by passions. Passions are going to pull you off of that road and sidetrack you. So the way I look at this, that I recently just came up with, was you're on the road, it's paved, you're driving, it's completely fine. You're going to get to your destination safely. But then the passions take hold, and now you're on a side path. You can still see the main path. It's there, you know. You're parallel to it. There's not much gap. But then time progresses. You get further and further. More passions pop up, take hold of you. You get further and further and further and further until eventually you're on like an off-beaten path in the middle of the woods, and it's super dangerous, and your entire drive now is filled with difficulties and roadblocks and uh, holes or damages, and you understand that you need to get back to the main road because you don't want to be on this road anymore. Being on it is obviously going to lead to you getting into a wreck, and ultimately, your vehicle, in this case, your body, using that as, is going to get destroyed, and then with you having your body destroyed, you know, what else is there after that? Especially since you're on the path of these passions, your soul's not going to reap good rewards from that. Um, that's just how that is. And so you realize, okay, well, I need to go back to the road. How can I do that? Well, I have to choose to drive through this mess of woods. Most likely, I can wreck my vehicle or damage it severely, and I might be able to get back to the road. But it's gonna be a hard journey. It's not gonna be easy. Ultimately, uh, what is said is that one needs to make themselves like a babe to return to the pristine simplicity. That's how Lao Tzu puts it. Christ tells us, unless one can become like one of the little children, they cannot, attain the kingdom of heaven. Because ultimately, in this sense, the child is like, I guess, initial man within um, the garden. The child will obey and follow and listen and do everything right. Sure, they have free will in like our sense. A child has free will, but in that sense, back in the garden, that's essentially how Adam was. He was like a child. He listened to God and followed him as he should. Um, it's like unadulterated love, essentially, for someone. That's how children have emotions towards like their mother, for example. They just have pure love towards them. There's typically, there's no hindrance of that actual emotion. Just as with most cases, mothers are the perfect example of Christ when they act towards their children because their love is boundless, like endless. It's like if you have a mother who actually acts as a mother, um, as a child, you probably won't want for anything emotionally, you know, which is awesome. But yeah, so that road that you're now in the woods and lost, you cannot literally go back and tear up all the road that you've now made on your path to get back to the original road. You have to, at this point, go through all the difficult terrain and merge back onto the road. Ultimately, you still get to the same place, back to the original road. But because of your sidetracks and your decisions, all these freedoms and choices, it's going to be tough and painful. So a lot of times, I find myself particularly thinking, I wish someone would just decide everything for me. I wish that they could tell me what to do and I could just follow and listen and obey. And obviously that's not free will, but sometimes I think free will is kind of pointless because I don't choose what I should almost all the time because I don't have a proper, maybe understanding myself, but definitely not a proper understanding of what love is, or humility or selflessness, particularly. So we get, you know, what is our cross? A hard, strenuous path that is going to leave us in a better position once we've um, transpired it, but the walk of the journey that we have to take with it is going to be a tough one that leaves us not necessarily damaged, but altered for sure. We will not be the original self that we were before we got off on the sidetracks. Our personality is going to be the same. Everyone has a unique personality that doesn't change. But the way that we characterize ourselves and, view ourselves, um, our self-expression is going to be different. And that's not a bad thing necessarily because change is a thing that has to happen. Change is good. As much as I, above all others, cannot stand change and am perfectly fine. Well, I say I'm perfectly fine with not changing and just doing the same thing over and over. But honestly, it's torment. It's total torture. Just being constantly doing the same thing over and over within your life. There's like several times I've had this happen. One time when I was in NEAT before joining the Navy, I was like that for like maybe 6 months. Just a total NEAT, doing the same thing day in, day out. In each moment, and I was like, okay, sure, fine, whatever. But time compounded, days passed by, and I would always be in a depressive state. Like looking back, I understand that, but then it was just like, oh, well, I have nothing to do, so that's why I'm like this. No, it was like the mindset of not changing, of being constantly the same and having no totality of experience with reality. Anyway, I got one last clip that I'll show, and then a little outro.
Narancia, what are you going to do?
I don't know. Please tell me. What now, Bucciarati? Help me. What should I do? Do you think I should go with you guys?
Are you scared?
I am. I'm honestly scared out of my mind. I need an order. Give me an order. Please just tell me to get my ass in gear like you always do. Give me an order and I won't be afraid anymore.
I will not. I can't decide your fate for you. The choice must be yours. Though we walk this world together, your path belongs to you.
But what does all that even mean? Damn it, what am I supposed to do?
So ultimately, just to conclude what we've gone over, your choices, irregardless of the choices that you make, can lead to many different outcomes. All these outcomes can negatively affect you or positively affect you. The choices that you make over time will catch up to you in some kind of regard. Um, we have to choose the pain over the pleasure because if we choose the pleasure, we're going to have a pain that is worse than anything we can imagine. Whereas if we choose the pain over the pleasure, then our, in a innocent sense of the word, our pleasure in the end will be great and very rewarding for our lives. We have to change. We have to understand our decisions, and our self awareness has to be brought to the forefront of our minds. We cannot act as though we are without impunity in everything that we do. We must act as though we are constantly on trial. Uh, and honestly, that's hard. You know, I can say all these things, whatever, but that doesn't mean I'm going to act that way. Unfortunately, it's very, very sad. You know, a creature of habit will continue the habit. Um, Change is hard, and I, above all, get that. So the best you can do is try day by day to make tiny changes, you know, week by week, month by month. These changes that you initiate and like successfully initiate will eventually make you into what you were trying to make yourself into, or what you're meant to be, you know. Um, but yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.